On November 1st, 1755, the people of Lisbon, Portugal, were in church. It was All Saints' Day, one of the holiest days in the Catholic calendar. The churches were full, the faithful were praying, the candles were lit, the priests were at the altar. And then the earth moved. One of the most powerful earthquakes in European history struck the city at 9:40 in the morning. The churches collapsed first. Because the churches were the largest buildings in the city, because the faithful had gathered inside them, because All Saints' Day had brought the most devout people in Lisbon to the most dangerous places at the most dangerous moment. Tens of thousands died, many of them on their knees, praying. Across the river, in the district of Alcantara, the brothels survived almost entirely intact. The churches were rubble. The brothels were standing. A Jesuit priest named Gabriel Malagrida declared that the earthquake was God's punishment for the sins of Lisbon. The philosopher Voltaire read this and wrote something that would shake the foundations of European theology. He asked the question that nobody in the church wanted to answer. If God destroyed the churches and spared the brothels, what exactly was he punishing? Today, we are going to ask the question that religion has spent 2,000 years trying to stop you from asking. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving, why does he not show up when it matters most? And what does his silence actually mean? Let us begin with the most devastating example in human history, the Holocaust. 6 million Jewish people. The people God called his chosen. The people to whom he revealed himself at Sinai. The people to whom he gave his law. The people with whom he made his covenant. Murdered. In the most systematic, industrialized, deliberate campaign of extermination in human history. And they prayed. In the ghettos, they prayed. In the cattle cars, they prayed. In the camps, they prayed. On the selection ramps, they prayed. In the gas chambers, historians have found evidence that people prayed. They prayed to the God who had called them chosen, and the trains kept running. The theologian Elie Wiesel, who survived Auschwitz and went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, wrote something in his memoir Night that has never been answered. He described watching a child being hanged in the camp, a child too light to die quickly, who hung there, strangling, for over half an hour while the prisoners were forced to watch. Someone behind Wiesel whispered, "Where is God now?" And Wiesel wrote that a voice inside him answered, "Where is he? Here he is. He is hanging here on this gallows." Not that God was present, that God was dead, that the God of the covenant, the God of the chosen people, the God who had promised to protect and redeem his people, had died in Auschwitz with the child. No theologian has ever adequately answered this, not one. They have tried. They have said that God gave human beings free will, and that the Holocaust was the result of human choices, not divine action. Which means the God who parted the Red Sea, who rained plagues on Egypt, who stopped the sun in the sky for Joshua, who sent fire from heaven for Elijah, this God, who intervened constantly and dramatically throughout the Old Testament, suddenly became unable to intervene when Jewish children were being thrown into furnaces in Poland. The free will argument does not explain the Holocaust. It explains why God did not stop Hitler. It does not explain why God did not stop the trains, why God did not cause the gas chambers to malfunction. The free will argument does not explain the Holocaust. It explains why God did not stop Hitler. It does not explain why God did not stop the trains, why God did not cause the gas chambers to malfunction, why God did not give the guards a moment of conscience, why God did not do anything for 6 million of his chosen people who were praying. Now let us talk about the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, the bubonic plague killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of the entire population of Europe, somewhere between 25 and 50 million people dead in 5 years. Europe in 1347 was the most thoroughly Christian civilization in human history. Every aspect of life was organized around the church. Every birth, every marriage, Every death, every meal, every day of the week, every season of the year was marked by religious ritual. These were not casual believers. These were people for whom God was as real and as present as the air they breathed. And they died screaming. The church's response was extraordinary in its inadequacy. Priests told the faithful to pray harder, to confess their sins, to give more to the church, to flagellate themselves in public processions, whipping their own backs bloody, to demonstrate their penitence. The plague did not care. It killed the penitent alongside the sinful. It killed the priests alongside the peasants. It killed children who had never sinned alongside adults who had sinned plenty. It killed a third of the clergy of Europe, men who had devoted their entire lives to God, who had given up family, property, comfort, ambition, everything, to serve the divine, dead of the same plague as everyone else. Now let us talk about something closer, something that happens not in history books but in hospitals right now. A child is diagnosed with cancer. The family prays. The congregation prays. The prayer chain is activated across the church network. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, lifting this child's name to God every single day. Believing, truly believing, not as a formality, not as a ritual, but with everything they have, because that is what they were told to do. Ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. If two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. These are not obscure passages. These are among the most quoted promises in the entire New Testament. And the child dies. And the pastor says it was God's plan. And the congregation says God needed another angel. And the parents, destroyed, gutted, holding the body of their child, are supposed to find comfort in the idea that the God who could have saved their child chose not to. Because he had a plan. What kind of plan requires the death of a child? What kind of God has that plan? And why does no one in the church ask that question out loud? Because the question is not allowed. That is the first thing you need to understand about this subject. The question is not allowed. In most religious communities, to question why God did not intervene is not treated as a sincere theological inquiry. It is treated as a failure of faith. You did not pray correctly. You did not believe hard enough. There was sin in your life that blocked the blessing. God said no because he has a better plan. Every one of these answers does the same thing. It protects God from accountability by locating the failure in the human being who was suffering. The child died not because God failed to act. The child died because you failed to believe correctly. This is not theology. This is abuse. Now let us talk about what philosophers call the problem of evil. It is the oldest and most devastating argument against the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God. The philosopher Epicurus framed it simply over 2,000 years ago. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not all-powerful. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then where does evil come from? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? No theologian in 2,000 years has satisfactorily answered this question. They have generated enormous amounts of sophisticated writing in the attempt. It is called theodicy, the defense of God's goodness in the face of evil and suffering. And every attempt at theodicy eventually arrives at the same place. God allows suffering because it serves a greater purpose that we cannot understand, which means the God of institutional religion is not the loving father figure of Sunday school. He is a being who watches children die of cancer, who watched 6 million of his chosen people walk into gas chambers, who watched the earthquake collapse the churches on All Saints' Day, and who finds all of this acceptable because it serves a purpose he has not explained. That is not a God worth worshiping. That is not a God worth fearing. That is a God worth questioning. And here's the thing that institutional religion has always known and always feared. Once you start questioning why God did not save them, you cannot stop. Because the question leads somewhere the institution cannot follow you. It leads to the possibility that the version of God you were sold, the personal, interventionist, prayer-answering, plan-having God of institutional religion, is not real. Not that the universe has no sacred dimension, not that there is no mystery at the heart of existence, but that the specific God who answers prayers, who has a plan for your life, who will protect you if you believe hard enough, who saved your parking spot but did not stop the Holocaust, that specific God, the one the institution sells, has no evidence supporting him. And the people who suffered most, the most faithful, the most devout, the ones who prayed hardest and believed most completely, they deserved better than the silence they received. They deserved an honest answer, which is this: the God of institutional religion is a product designed to generate obedience, to generate revenue, to generate dependence on the institution that claims to represent him. A God who always answers prayer is not useful to the institution. A God who sometimes answers and sometimes does not, whose ways are mysterious, whose silence must be interpreted by authorized representatives. That God is infinitely more useful, because you need the institution to tell you what the silence means. You need the priest, the pastor, the prophet, the televangelist, to explain why God said no this time, and to tell you what you need to do differently next time. So that next time, maybe, he will say yes. The Lisbon earthquake killed the faithful in their churches and spared the brothels across the river. Voltaire saw this and asked the question. 270 years later, we are still waiting for the answer. You have been watching Unmasking the Gods. If God did not save them, the Holocaust survivors who prayed in the camps, the plague victims who died confessing their sins, the children whose congregations prayed without ceasing, then the question is not, where was God? The question is, what were you sold, and who benefited from the sale? Subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you want to unmask next. And remember, the gods were never what they told you, but what they actually are is worth everything.